2 years ago, I shared a bag making tutorial that quickly became one of my most popular videos. A ton of people downloaded the free PDF template for that bag, and I myself made a few versions of that for friends and family. For some time now, I've been wanting to make an update to that bag and to that template, and today is the day we get to make it together. This bag is made with some gorgeous vegetable tanned leather that was sent to me by the Rademacher tannery in Belgium, but more on those guys a bit later. To get started, print out the template on thick A4 sized paper, making sure you check your printer settings to be sure to print at 100% of the original size. You can then cut out the different pieces and attach the body bag pieces together. Bag front, bag bottom, bag back, and bag back to front flap together using tape. Optionally, you can glue this paper template to a cardstock and then cut that out to make sure your template lasts you a much longer time. For this build, I'm using Rademacher's Niagara shoulder leather in cognac. It comes in 1.5 to 2 mm thick, which is perfect for me since I'll be adding a leather lining that will bring the total thickness up to around 3 mm, providing me with a nice rigidity to the final build. Rademacher is an old tannery here in Europe and have a rich history of producing natural, robust and authentic saddle leathers. I've used them in the past and, as a small crafter, I really appreciate being able to buy single sides, shoulders, half shoulders or belt blanks from them, as their leathers are, simply put, gorgeous and come in a wide variety of sizes and colours and thicknesses. They kindly provided the Niagara leather that I'm using as the main leather for this build. If you want to check out their leathers, be sure to hit the link in the description below. Once all the pieces are cut out, we'll start by skiving down the ends of the strap loops. This doesn't need to be perfect, it simply needs to be thinned down as much as possible at the ends. Place the side gusset template on your piece to see where to punch out the hole. My oblong punch is 22 mm by 5 mm, but if you don't have one, you can always cut this out by hand using the template to mark out the cut. Using a thin edge beveler, bevel the outside of the hole as well as the bottom inside portion. The strap loop itself only needs to be beveled where the edges will be visible. To make sure the edges match the colour of the leather, I'm using Fibing's Pro Dye in their English bridal colour. Carefully dye the edges and apply Tokonol as a burnishing agent. Burnishing edges is the process of applying friction and heat to be able to really come and bond those fibres. Your edge will look much better and be much more durable with time. There are many different ways of burnishing an edge, and you can definitely get away with using gum tragicant or water, but if you can get some Tokonol, I have found in my testing that that is the king to getting the best burnishes. At this point, I go ahead and add a crease line on the strap loops. This is optional, but helps give the final piece a much more elegant finish. Fold them in half, add your chosen strap hardware, and glue in place. I like to scuff up the grain side of the leather before applying any glue, as this exposes the leather fibres and gives the glue something to bond to. Gluing the strap loops in place isn't really necessary, but it does help keep things in place until they're riveted and stitched in. Using the template, mark out and punch the hole for the rivet. I use a simple cap rivet here, which will be more than strong enough along with the stitching. My preferred stitching irons here are going to be the Crimson Hide stitching irons in their 3.25mm spacing and French tips. French tip stitching irons produce a thinner, smaller, neater hole than the diamond tipped or Japanese or traditional style stitching irons. These look marginally better in theory, though they're also slightly harder to stitch. In my experience, they do indeed look a bit better, though again it's only marginal. After punching out my stitching holes, I'm using 0.5mm thick Maisie linen thread in this caramel colour, matching the cognac colour of the leather. I like to run the thread through beeswax to help stiffen it, helping me during my stitching process and protecting the thread from wear and tear. Time to put the gusset aside for now and start working on the back pocket. Before stitching this to the bag body, we need to take care of all the edges. This means beveling the edges, dyeing them, and burnishing them. Again, I like to add crease lines to my edges as I find this really adds to the finished look. Now that the pocket is ready, I'll address the front flap's closing mechanism. It's important to note that I designed this bag with the lock's closing mechanism in mind specifically. We'll get to that at the end of the video, but I strongly recommend you think about adapting this part of the video and this build to your preferred closing mechanism of choice. Though I'm really happy with how the bag turns out in the end, somehow I only realised my hole was crooked after I started punching the holes for stitching. The fact that this isn't perfectly round is a small detail that really bugs me throughout the whole process. But at this stage, I've only got two real options if I want to correct this. One would be redo this whole piece, which means binning this piece of leather, which I don't want to do. And two would be finding a way of camouflaging it, which might be adding another piece on top. But because I want to keep this build as minimalist as possible, as simple and stylish as possible, I just decided at this point, I have to learn to live with it. Once your locking mechanism choice has been sorted out, place the template on your bag body to see where your back pocket is going to sit, and mark out the bottom stitching line. This will be your reference to help you temporarily glue down the back pocket while you stitch it. Scratching the leather will again help the glue bond to the fibres. All stitched up, and this bag is starting to look pretty neat. For my lining material, I'm using vegetable tanned leather in dark green, as I want to make this bag as fancy as possible. Again, you could build this bag without lining if you wanted to. Just make sure your choice of leather is thick enough if you're not lining it. Time to glue the lining onto the side gussets, hiding the strap loops on the inside of the bag, ultimately helping keep this bag looking as good as possible. I like to use a rotary cutter to trim the excess leather, as this is a surprisingly fast and precise tool. If possible, use a groover to create a channel 5mm from the edge of the gusset on the inside. This will be your guide to help you skive down those edges to perfection, a crucial step in the process, allowing you to bend the edges over later. For this, I'm using a French skiver. French stitching iron, French skiver, there's a theme here. Take your time doing this, as it's going to greatly help in shaping the final bag. As you can see, that groove meant my skived edges look really crisp, and it really wasn't that hard to do. Take care of those top edges, beveling, dyeing, and burnishing them to perfection. A final crease line to round things out in style. Using your fingers at first, gently roll the edges of the gusset outwards. Once you're about halfway there, you can accentuate the roll using a bone folder, making sure the rolled edge comes out at a 90 degrees angle if possible. As you can see, I've glued the lining into the bag body. The final step before assembling this bag is preparing and installing the interior pocket. This is an optional step, but if you decide to add this in, note that I've left the template wider than needed. This is so that I can install the pocket and then trim as needed directly to the exact size when installed. Once the top edge is ready, I mark out where the top of the pocket needs to be on the bag body, mark my stitch line on the pocket, lay down a strip of double-sided tape to hold the pocket in temporarily and line the pocket up to my previous marks on the body bag. At this point you can see I've stitched the pockets in and trimmed the sides. Go ahead and glue them down now after roughing up the leather on the bag body. Starting off the final lap of this build, let's address the front edge of the bag. After sanding down to even out any blemishes, we'll give the edge the usual dye, burnishing and crease line. We can now prepare the edges for gluing the gussets in place. I'm using a strong neoprene cement glue that needs to be applied on both edges and dry out for 5 minutes before the two pieces can be gently squeezed together. This part can be a bit tricky, making sure that you tackle those tight corners, lining up all the edges as close as possible to fit. To help you throughout this process, you may want to use a couple dozen small paper clips to hold your pieces together. Yes, there is still a lot to do at this point, but it's really nice to take a few minutes just to stare at the bag as it's really starting to shape up. Carefully punch out the holes all around your gusset, sticking close to the inside of the gussets. Optionally, you can stitch around the front of the flap, but in this case I wanted to leave the front relatively simple and neat. Off we go for the stitching, using the saddle stitch technique. It's a slow process, but ever so rewarding. Let's take another stare, and then quickly get out the Dremel to shave down all those edges to ensure everything fits perfectly. You could do this by hand, but it would take a really long time, and having this tool helps me cut down on a lot of fiddly work. Be careful here, as using such a powerful tool, it's easy to mess up and really damage the bag. With those edges getting closer to their final form, bevel them down and use some fine sandpaper to even out any blemishes. The final dye and burnish, then one last edge crease. I mentioned earlier that I was going to be using the lock's closing mechanism, and I really find that this is a great, elegant and secure option, allowing you to open and close the bag securely very easily. After carefully punching out the 10mm hole on the front of the flap, and finding a way to do the same on the bag body without damaging it, the installation process is really simple and satisfying. The bag is basically finished, with the only thing left to tackle here being the strap. I'm not going to be showing this build on the camera as there are tons of options out there, and I really don't think watching me stitch for 3 hours straight is very interesting. So we'll simply finish the bag by adding a protective layer of wax, and for me, this means grabbing my trusty Saphir Renovateur, as I find it leaves me with the absolute best finish possible. This bag turned out great, and it's in real part thanks to that wonderful leather sent to me by Radomica. This Niagara leather in cognac has a rich, deep, lustrous and timeless look to it, and I'm really excited to see how it's going to age throughout the years. As I mentioned, the link to their website is going to be down in the description of this video, so go and check it out if you're interested. And if you're curious to watch the video that started this whole project, go ahead and hit this button here and watch my original video, and you can even grab yourself another free PDF downloadable template. That is hard to say, free PDF downloadable template. It's all there.